There we go. Thank you for joining me, Julie, for a chat.
You're welcome. My
And a
pleasure.
cuppa té, or I don't know how you say fizzy water in Irish.
An ishke will do.
Ishka, yeah, ishka will do, indeed. So I've been looking forward to speaking with you and getting to know a little bit about what it was like growing up in a Gaeltacht in Ireland, so an Irish-speaking region of Ireland. Did you grow up in Connemara?
I did, yes. I grew up in Connemara and I went to school in Connemara, my primary and secondary schooling. And it was great. Connemara is very similar to Tasmania in so many ways. Lots of rolling hills, lots of green, ocean, cold weather, the dark clouds that I really love, that you feel very sheltered by. Yes, it was just great growing up there. Growing up in a Gaeltacht is obviously not very different to growing up anywhere else, except you're just speaking your own language. So it was fun, lots of connections with nature. We grew up on the coast, so lots of connections with the ocean, fishing, that sort of stuff. We had, where I come from, I don't know if you know of the currachs. They have those wooden boats that we use a lot for rowing and racing as well. We have festivals there where we race them a couple of times a year. They're quite big events and that. But it was beautiful. It was a very free place to live. So you're very connected to mountains and hills and that sort of stuff. And rocks. Oh, yeah, I forgot the rocks. My favorite part. Lots and lots of rocks and massive boulders, just completely covering the landscape. So I love rocks. I could just look all day at rocks and trees.
Yeah, I always think of rocks as being the bones of the earth. So it's that sort of
it does feel like that. So I think with Tasmania particularly, I love the colors in Tasmania. You've got some sort of purple hills, you've got some yellowish hills, you've got blue, lots of different types of blue. I love that. That's really beautiful, and that really kind of is very resting for my eyes. I like it quite a lot. And the only thing I think that reminds me of where I am is when I see the gum trees. That's really reminds me that they're a little bit unfamiliar to me in how they look, and how scrawny they can be, and how wriggly they look, and how thin they can be, and so frail looking. But they're so beautiful to look at. I always call them the screaming trees. When I lived in WA, I used to walk with my dog around the lake in Guelph, and I always call them the screaming trees because there's just so much character to the trees as you're walking around. It's just beautiful.
Yes, they're very gnarled, aren't they? So they sort of do seem like they've got their own personality, I think, the gum trees.
Sure, yes. And they fall a lot too, which is quite interesting. There's a lot of fallen trees. So I don't know whether they're very deep rooted or not, but they seem to fall a lot, and they look so dry. They look like they're really parching and they're really thirsty. So yeah. They're stories to tell, those trees, for sure.
Yes, I think the landscape can speak to us in so many ways, in those sort of small details, like perhaps, the shapes of those trees. And I'm sure that there must be those shapes of trees of Ireland that it does something to you internally when you see those silhouettes. And
yes, it does. I suppose like looking at art, isn't it?
Yeah,
it has an effect on you. So shapes have an effect on us, and just looking at them, you can see personalities in trees. And I think that's really quite interesting.
Yes, no, I love that too. I have a quote here, Julie, that I found of yours in an article from the Irish Times, where you have said, I began to realize how much languages shape who we are, how we think, and what we think about. And it was in an article where you were talking about growing up in the Gaeltacht, and when you first realized that you were an Irish speaker. And in the article, you spoke about how you asked your mum, am I an Irish speaker? Or it was there was some sort of dialogue along those lines.
Yes, because you get labeled as such. You don't know what you're speaking when you're a child. You're just joining in, aren't you?
Yes,
you're just doing what everybody else around you is doing. You're communicating with them and trying to figure out stuff. So you don't really know what language you're speaking until somebody gives it a label and says that is such and such, or you are speaking that, and you kind of go, am I? Okay. And that doesn't really happen until maybe later on, maybe in life, when you're becoming aware of these things. But yeah, I suppose you have to be exposed to another language to know about the language that you're speaking, don't you?
Mm.
So
well,
yeah,
I nod my head, but I can't really speak to that because I'm not bilingual. So I'm only, I can only speak one language, and my Irish is very basic, Julie. My Irish is very basic, but because I don't have that other perspective, I'd love for you to share how does the language shape you? So you spoke to in the article how the Irish language has shaped you in a particular way, as opposed to perhaps the English language shaped you. Could you speak to that a little?
Well, it does. I mean, language does shape us, of course, and I suppose the Irish language is a very emotional language. So there's a lot of expressions that we use in the Irish language that we may not use in English. When you are bilingual, it's kind of like being two people, really. You know, you're thinking in one way, and then you're shifting. And you know, when you switch your language, you're thinking in a different way and engaging in a different way, obviously. So it kind of feels like that. It feels like you belong to two cultures, you know, and you can shift really between them, but one of them takes over after a while. In my case, it kind of has to, because beyond secondary school, the opportunities weren't there for me to continue with learning through Irish. We had to switch. So at some point, accidentally in my case, I I had to switch, and it was then, I suppose, then another identity starts to grow and starts to nestle, I suppose, in your mind a bit, and you start to just go down a different route, don't you?
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think that's kind of how it happened to me. It kind of, it's a little bit, we have no choice in it when we're pushed into another world and into another language that we have to use all day. And I mean, we're not without English in the Gaeltacht. We do hear it, we do see it on TV.
Yeah.
So it's not as if we're not exposed to it. It's there. We know it's around us. It's just that, well, it's sitting there. It's not used as much, but perhaps there's a bit more use now than it was in my day, because more and more people are using English in the Gaeltacht. But yeah, you're aware of its presence, but it doesn't have much of an effect on you.
Yeah, of course. And is there a distinct feeling to each language? Is there a way that you could describe if the language was a person, if the Irish language was a person and the English language was a person, could there be ways that you could describe them, or would you not dare to traverse that territory?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't dare traverse it, to be honest, Amy, because I'm so close to both of them now. It's very hard for me to stand back from either of them and kind of describe them like that. But the Irish language to me is very poetic. It's warm, and it's comforting language, I would say. Like I said earlier, there's lots of emotion in it, so it's very easy to express yourself and express your emotions. There's good words you can use to express emotions in the Irish language. And for me, the English language seems a little bit more cut off and more distant. I feel that the Irish language kind of belongs to a collectivist culture, perhaps. We're very family oriented. And I feel that perhaps the English language belongs more to an individualistic type culture. Certainly when I was growing up, we didn't use a lot of I feel or I am or any of those things.
Oh, really?
No, it was
oh,
more
that's so interesting.
Yeah, so those are the things that I felt I had to learn when I started using more and more English.
So what would you use, sorry, Julie, in those places? Or would you just not, you wouldn't be trying to express an emotion that way? You would
Yeah, you probably
phrase it
wouldn't.
differently.
Yes, you'd phrase it differently. Yes, you probably
Yeah.
wouldn't say I feel at the beginning of a sentence. So it's those kinds of things. They're just little things that stick with you. But yeah, um, it's very hard again to pull myself out of both of those and to stand back and look objectively
Of
at each
course.
of them. Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're so enmeshed, aren't they?
With
Yeah.
the Irish language, it's the small amount that I can speak about. There's a sense of emotions are on you, aren't they?
Yeah.
You sort of like Tob Bronor, like, is that
Mm,
I am sad, or hunger is
yeah.
on me, or sadness is on me, or
Mm,
happiness is on me.
yeah.
Do you think, yeah, that way of expressing an emotion, for example, in Irish, does it empower the individual to not identify as much with a feeling? Because
Yeah.
you're saying something is
Yeah.
on me, rather than in English, where it's very much I am. So it's sort of like my
Yeah.
being is sad,
Yeah.
my being is hungry.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I have seen comments like that on social media about tá bronnarm, tá uchrasar, and all of those things. Hunger is upon me and thirst is upon me and all those feelings. And I suppose, yeah, I mean, I hadn't really analyzed that very much before, but I suppose it does help distance yourself from the feeling a bit, doesn't it? It doesn't entirely belong to you.
Yeah.
Something that you have that is temporary.
Yes.
So yeah, so perhaps yes. Again, there are other ways to say in the Irish language. Tá mé brónach is kind of like saying I am sad. So it depends on how you say it, but I think the most common way would be tá brónaram, tá uchrasaram, tá tartaram, tá faragaram, all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really
Interesting
interesting.
theory, though.
Well, it was just a thought that I had, sort of, because it is such a, as you've described, the Irish language seems to be a very emotive and emotional language, and deeply felt language, but maybe there's more capacity within the language to explore those places, because there's a better understanding about emotion or psychology and like the passing phases of that, as opposed to a real identification with a particular emotional way of being, or yes, well, the English language could maybe be very matter of fact, or very sort of like, this is it.
Yes.
As opposed to being a bit more generous and
yes,
allowing
I would agree with
space.
that. Yes, there's a firmness to the English language, isn't there? I feel that.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
feel that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's, are you a psychologist, Julie? Did I see that? Yeah. So I wonder whether you would find actually did you do psychology in Ireland at Speaking Irish?
I did it in England, actually.
You did it in England. Okay. Because that would be interesting, sort of in those two fields, like how is Irish, not that you can call something Irish psychology, like we're all human at the end of the day, really, aren't we? But it would be interesting to see, is the language within that, like, academic space different when people are speaking in Irish about psychology, as opposed to when we're speaking in English about psychology, and in that sort of medical way. Do you kind of get what I mean?
I do, yes, I do. I mean, there's constructions in both language, aren't there, about what those things mean, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it would be different. I mean, if you're using Spanish, I'm sure there will be another type of there are ways of looking at the world, aren't there?
Yeah.
Narrative. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, in that article that I'd read of yours in the Irish Times, you mentioned the terms social constructionism.
Yeah.
And you were sort of speaking to it in a way of, as I understood it, it was sort of like we all live within a social construct, and that's deeply rooted, obviously, within the culture that we're living in. And yeah, could you just explain social constructionism?
Well, yes, it was kind of it's kind of what you just said.
Okay.
It's narratives and ideas that we develop and form and become kind of fixed in some ways, even though they are malleable, I suppose, in lots of ways. but they're ideas that we form when we grow up about what the world is like, or how we feel, or what we like to do, or how we live, or whatever. It can be anything. So it's just ideas we form, I suppose, in groups that we decide what things are.
Yeah.
It kind of, yeah. So each culture, I suppose, would have their own way of thinking about things. So,
and you mentioned the Irish language perhaps thinks in a collectivist way. Is that, and does that almost go back to sort of like it being an Indigenous culture within Ireland? Potentially.
Yes, potentially. Yes.
Sorry, I'm probably asking questions that might be a bit tricky to provide answers for.
Yes, they are quite tricky questions, but interesting nevertheless. I mean, one thing I remember from my youth, for example, is at funerals, for example. That's a place in the Irish language when I mean it also applies to English-speaking Ireland, but particularly in the Irish-speaking part, funerals are very, very big emotional things. And we used to have, back in the day, we used to have wailing women. I remember my grandma talking about them when my grandma lived with us. And I often wonder what the role of that woman was, and it was very much to almost to carry the group emotionally, in terms of expressing the loss that everybody is feeling when they lost someone that they loved. So that always sticks with me, that kind of carrying that people did for each other,
and that was an art form in itself as well, the keen, wasn't it? Like women were sort of sought out to be keeners at funerals, and there was a particular the songs that they were singing were arranged in a particular way, and sort of this very interesting.
That's right. And I often wondered like why. And it's almost like permission was given to people who had difficulty expressing those things, perhaps, to just help somebody else help them through it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's my own theory now. I haven't done any reading on that or anything, but it's just like people had roles to sort of carry each other emotionally. And I quite like that. It's very powerful. I mean, you do see similar things in other cultures too, like Arabic cultures and stuff. But that's one that kind of stuck with me, that I always thought was very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting and very beautiful.
Yes,
I think the Irish do death very, very well.
Yes, I think we forgot that until I went home recently, and it was when I was at a funeral there, and just everybody comes out to support. The whole community are there. Or somebody from a family will turn up on behalf of the family.
Wow.
To come out and support a person who has lost someone. That's just beautiful. And it reminds me of the difference between the funerals that people have in other cultures, where it's just a few people. And they're left to carry all that by themselves. What a weight they have to carry,
Yeah.
I just think the big group, and I know for myself personally, when I lost my mum, how supportive that was. And I'd forgotten how supportive it was, because everybody was kind of coming and acknowledging, and even just some of them didn't say anything. They would just sit with you and be present with you, and that's sufficient acknowledgement, I think, to really help you. And it really did help too. Yeah, so I think that's wonderful.
That's beautiful. Oh, sorry, my son's just run into the room. Hello, love. Interruptions. I'm sure you have it. Do you have any kids?
I do.
Okay.
I have a son. He's 17 though.
Oh wow, gosh, so grown up.
Yeah, I'm expecting him to come bounding in from school any minute. So, yeah.
Is he born in Australia, or is he
No, actually, he was born in England.
Oh wow, cool.
Moved to Australia when he was 3, so he's Aussie.
He's Aussie. Does he speak Irish? Are you trying to
No,
teach him?
he doesn't. And I did work very hard. And I think with most kids, particularly immigrant kids, they tend to sink into the language of the country they're in a lot more. It becomes very loud and very dominant around them. So, if there isn't a language around you, it's very difficult to keep it going.
Of course.
If it's spoken around you. And I tried quite hard, but I have to say that I didn't do very well in that respect. And so I thought, well, what can I do to keep it going? So I thought, well, maybe I could teach others. So seeing that my son didn't show much of an interest, I thought, okay, well, I'll work with those who did. And I did a little bit of work with like local people in WA and were interested in that. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeping it alive for yourself as well, right? Because you're able to
yeah.
speak it and pass on your knowledge. Do you think it's important for Australians who might have Irish ancestry or Irish heritage to consider learning the language if
well, many do actually.
Mm.
Yeah, in WA there was there were classes all over Australia.
Yes.
And they're attended quite well as far as I know. From my experience in WA, there were quite a few people who were very much interested in connecting with it. I was part of the Australian Irish Heritage Association for a while, and I met quite a few people through that group who were very interested in the Irish language and were very keen to speak it and use it and find out what's going on with it, and and all that sort of stuff. So yes, whether it's important to them, it's obviously important to them. They're seeking it out, and so yeah, it means a lot to them. So
did you get a sense from what space that was coming from? Like, was that coming from a wanting to connect with a culture of their ancestors, or did anyone ever share with you their reasons for? Obviously, the Irish language is a beautiful language in and of itself. But
well, look, yeah, many of them do share their reasons, and I think that's why they do it. I mean, one of the reasons I keep using it myself is to connect with my own culture. I mean, those organizations exist specifically for that.
Yes.
So that you don't feel completely consumed by something else, so that you have some sort of connection. Particularly, I think in Australia is quite important because we're very far away here. We're very cut off from home, and it's not Ireland isn't somewhere you can just pop to. You have to. It's a logistical operation.
It is, and expensive, right?
Yes, and you need a lot of time, and it's very, very tiring.
Yeah.
So there's all of those things to consider. So you kind of have to create it where you are a little bit to give yourself a little respite every now and again to remind yourself of who you are. And for me, I hadn't actually spoken Irish for a very long time, and it was only accidentally and it was really accidentally that I started using it again. I was walking down in a loo.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I know.
Yes. I was passing Dimmicks and I popped in because I saw a poetry book in the bestseller section. I thought, well, that's very rare. And I used to really like poetry. So I looked at it and thought, oh, this is quite nice. And I started flicking through it, and I thought, oh, I'd really like to do something like this. When I started, then I accidentally, and I really didn't know that much, but I started writing it in Irish first. And that's when I thought, oh, I'll just keep going with this. This is the most beautiful thing. This is just very calming exercise. It's a very mindful exercise. And I can do a lot of reflections on all the things that I've kind of left behind in that. So that's how I started writing again. I always thank Cassandra Atherton at Deakin University for that, because she wrote the book that I picked up.
Oh, wow.
She edited, yes. And I've been reading that book ever since. Yeah. So that's kind of inspired me to write prose poetry, because I hadn't really heard of that genre that much, but I had written other little bits of just ordinary poetry before that. So yeah, that's kind of what got me really going.
Wow. So it was through the art form of prose poetry that you were called back to the language.
Yes.
That's really beautiful.
I also think prose poetry is kind of suitable for Irish language writing, I think. You kind of speak in bursts, and that's kind of a passion that I'm very familiar with.
Yes, okay. Yes. It is such beautiful prose as well, or prose poetry. It's specifically prose poetry, isn't it? It's
well, that's what they say, yeah, but prose poetry is I've been reading up on what it actually is, because people ask me all the time what exactly is. It's just poetry in the form of prose, or poetry and prose. So really, I mean, you know, the clues of the title, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's beautiful. And so this is your third book of
Yes.
prose poetry, Julie.
Yes.
And the title is for
Craw-vah Scoilte, yes.
Craw-vah Scoilte, which means split bones.
Split bones, yes. Yes.
And yeah, is the split bones a sense of your bones being split between two places? Yeah.
Yes. When you've got a foot in both lands now,
Yeah.
after a while, when another sort of land creeps into you and becomes part of you, whether you want it to or not, it just does.
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't, then there's an issue, you know?
Yeah.
It will seep through, and it will start affecting you, and it will start shaping you, and you start to become very connected to it as well.
Yeah.
And it's that transition, really, I suppose I was referring to when I called it split bones. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about this kind of stuff forever, and I didn't fill the whole book, I hope, with all sorts of things to do with that kind of dichotomy. I think I put some other poems in as well to lighten the load.
Yes. No, I thought it was a beautiful. I've only sort of read maybe a third of it, which is still a number of poems that I've read. But it's sort of we're taking a tour through your life and sort of getting little windows into moments that have really affected you, and then I guess you've carried them with you, and then this is like an outpouring of the internal workings of what has happened. And I think it's stunning. I wish that I could read. Obviously I can pick up a few of the words in Irish, but my goal is to, when my Irish improves, to read one part in Irish and then read it in English, which I guess is how you wanted people to read it, right?
Yes.
Like
yes, that would be great
to be able to read both.
Yes, because it's actually quite difficult to translate poetry. I mean, those two languages taste very different.
Yes. And you write the Irish first, and
I
then
write
the English. The Irish is always written first.
Yes, I've always written the Irish first and then translated, but recently I've written in English to see if it was any easier, and then tried to translate, but it's just as difficult, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought maybe I'll try it the other way around. Maybe that will, you know, make it sound a bit more coherent, but they don't sit very well together. But nevertheless, you know, I try to get the flavor of each one in English to the best of my ability. So yeah.
No, I think whatever you're doing works very well, because they're very moving poems to read. And would you mind sharing one with us, Julie? Do you have a copy of? Would you mind reading it in Irish and then reading it in English for us? That would be wonderful.
Sure. Do you have any particular one in mind?
I did have my bookmark on one. Let me see where it was. I loved Ally, which is on 21.
Ally.
I don't know whether that might be a bit too
personal.
Yes. And I think
no,
because
not at all. I love this one myself.
Yes.
It's about my mum.
That's what I thought it was. And also for me, what stuck out was On a Mahogany Table, which for me was just, that was that real, being a Western Australian myself, that was a real moment of recognition through an object of what's going on, you know, sort of like these two worlds coming together on the coffee table. But the coffee table is made of this native timber of Western Australia, but you're reflecting on your Irish past, I guess.
Yes, and I want to say, like, that particular one, my mom was really my ally. She really was. She was just one of those. I had a really close relationship with her, and she's just one of those people that, like, they know you better than you know yourself. You know? And they know what you're going to do and what you're not going to do before you've decided what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. So yeah, she used to always help me come out of the history class, because my mind used to just go off somewhere else in history class. So yeah. I can read that one for you.
I love that.
It's called Crawna Eh-leh. Okay. Chlúirító a gúil mo chin gur tháinig mé ar lorg de féin chórt an Ullaigh. An cán zearna chód a bhí cura I dteisce a bhráma go barneach mar cheodóir chúl de fictúr ar an talach. Drolín bronnach a mús a sneachta ar a chlúdach. Na corneal sketse, Strakey. Gilhi dai wog room gan focal. Gach cor, lúb, cas, cwr is rybl, la cor de vere. Ag Cnamha Scoilte fut is dardú ol Homer sacrithe. Vord mahogany tá pochotí is scracha na varnishe, ag bulga is caloga sharga ag snáb a maul a baine. Té bui bug ag gopon porcelain. Kraken ime is knockan civis suhatalun de rán bailagad. Maidin dov híbre ag réitecht an scail. Gá war a tasa cur agad le marútini, ag scríb leisgil am go bhétain an rang stare u de hachans. Díle ag ropa pan na funeage. Ní dhéanach ólas fi réilód na Franke na Operation Barbarossa, tarfa gomsa, mar nach suhan é cheaptar. Is go mearlam sa bheith bringlód I gúni, is ag Cnamha Scoilte fi rudí nar hála riamh. Is sían pastí de chorpa ma lábhainneamh, ma chora gwibne gur agat a bhí an ceart.
Thank you. That was
That's all
beautiful,
right.
Julie.
Thank you.
Could you read the English for us as well,
Sure,
Julie?
yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I know I've probably got about 2 Irish speakers that listen to,
Yes.
and you're one of them potentially.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Ally, you nestled in the back of my mind until I came upon the mark of your pen on a Christmas card. The last one that had frugally saved like a precious jewel at the back of your photograph on the mantelpiece. A melancholy wren adorned its cover adrift in snow. The corners frayed and faded. Your soft face appeared before me wordless, every twist, loop, slant, and tail made by your moving fingers telling tales on you and raising you from your settled tomb. On a mahogany table, there are pustules and scabs of varnish bubbling, withered flakes swimming in a bowl of milk, lukewarm tea in a porcelain cup, a skin of butter and mounds of strawberry jam on your homemade bread, a dark winter morning preparing for school, 2 bars of heat placed at my ankles, writing excuses for me so I could avoid that history class. Rain pelting the window. I needn't know about Operation Barbarossa or the French Revolution anyway, you said. I'd not absorb it, you thought, as I'd rather be dreaming in corners and writing stories about things that never happened. Pieces of your body sit in my hand today, reminding me of how right you were.
Thank you, Julie.
All right.
That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Equally as beautiful in English as it sounded in Irish, I find.
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you next if you would imagine, I guess, into the future. You're from Ireland, and
Yes.
you're sort of, I guess your son, even though he was born in England, he's sort of almost like the first generation of Australians, or his children, if he were to have children, would be a first generation of Australians. If you cast your mind, your imagination forward a couple of generations to your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, would you want them to have a connection to Ireland, or would it only if
only if they wanted it, always, you know, if
course.
it's important to them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you do meet when you live in a country that's not your home country, you do meet people who are second, third generation here already. Some of them are very interested in it, some of them not so much. So I think if you're the type of person that takes an interest in that sort of thing, absolutely. But if you're not, you're not. You know? So I'd like my great-great-great-grandchildren to be whatever they would like to be. So whatever they're taking interest in, as long as they're happy doing that, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
And I'll just ask one last thing, Julie, because my program is about music and Celtic music. Would you have any songs, traditional Irish songs, or any songs sung in the Irish language that are particularly meaningful for you, that I could perhaps play on the session?
Oh,
where I share your poetry and our chat.
there was a particular song called Tá mé Mohi, I Am Awake.
Ah,
It's a very sad song, and my grandmother used to sing it. It was her favorite.
wow.
That one is particularly beautiful, and I like that one a lot. The other one that I like is I'm trying to think of the name. I'm singing it in my head, going through the lyrics so I can come to the title.
That's okay. Take your
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Eileen Arun. So
Mm,
Eileen, my love. That's a beautiful one.
yes.
Also,
Yeah.
so I mean, a lot of the old Sean-nós Irish songs are about love and longing and loss.
Mm,
Important things, I think, you know.
I agree.
Yeah, so they're all really quite beautiful. But Tá mé Mohi sits in my mind, and Eileen Arun as well. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for those recommendations. I will find them. I've already got Eileen Narun. There's Seamus and Kiva Flahata, who are from Connemara, and they're Sean-nós singers. They do a version of that. But I think theirs was, but theirs might actually be called Eleanor Narun, I think. But it might be.
Yes.
Yes, it might be.
Yes. There's another American girl whose name I can't think of. It's her first name is Madeline, and she does a lovely.
Monaghan.
What's her name?
Madeline Monaghan. She does a lot of Sean-nós.
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful voice.
Beautiful voice.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to see that tradition in the US, sort of in that Celtic diaspora, still being sung and sort of being reawakened by her. That's amazing.
I think that there's a quite strong diaspora in the States.
Yeah.
It's always been very strong there, I think. And
I think
Irish roots, yes.
Yes, I find that too. And I think in Australia it can be found in sort of pockets, but quite often
I agree.
It's been transmitted along with that sort of Irish Catholic. It's kind of you can't pull them apart. It's like the culture, the Irish culture it's been carried through Irish Catholic families, and which is probably the same in the US. It's really interesting to see. Actually, I have a fantastic book called The New Irish in Australia, which it talks about sort of over the past 150 years, sort of how the Irish have sort of come to Australia and affected the politics and all of the different expressions of Irishness in Australia, and then how they've evolved through the generations, and people multiple generations along will still identify as being of Irish descent. So, and my grandfather's a perfect example. He was like third generation Irish, and he still identified as being of Irish. But yes, so it's this sort of interesting thing which you get in the immigrant Irish populations, where they hold on to that identity.
I think I was just talking to my neighbor actually about this only last week, but I think when you're somewhere new, it becomes for some people an even bigger thing, an even more important thing to find out who you are, or where you come from. Whereas if perhaps you're not an immigrant, there's no need, because where you are is right there.
Yep, of course.
You are where you have been, and your people are all around you, and everything is familiar. And the generation where I grew up, generations of my family are around me. All of them, my cousins and their cousins are down the road, and and perhaps when it gets taken away, it becomes a bigger thing to try and find out who you are, where you came from, what brought you somewhere new, why you came there. All those kinds of things are important to some people.
I think there's a longing, isn't there, for an identity. An understanding.
Your story and your family story. That's kind of it's grounding for them, I suppose. So that's important,
I agree. I find it grounding for me, having that sense of where we come from.
Because it was taken from, not so much taken from you, but it's shifted so much for you for your family.
Yeah. Yes,
know?
totally. It's sort of at that point where it is inaccessible because we're not Irish, we're Australian, and we're sort of
Yes,
4 or 5 generations deep Australian. And then it's sort
yes,
of, you know, yeah, but that's part of your identity in a strange way.
it
So
is. Yeah,
yeah. Mm.
it is. So I suspect they're the questions that a lot of people want answered, aren't they? Maybe at some point during their life they might think, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
How
I
did
think
I
we all
get
get to that point. How did I get here? Would you ever move back to Ireland, Julie, or is your
here?
home in Australia now? You now stand across
Yeah,
this
yes.
great space.
I think moving to Ireland would be very difficult, I think, for me now.
Mm.
Um, you know, your country shifts when you go, yet it stands still in your own mind.
Yes.
And when you visit, it has shifted and shifted and shifted, and so have you.
Mm.
So um, it's wonderful to go back to Ireland. It's beautiful, and it's great to speak Irish, particularly because that really grounds you.
Wow.
Um, yeah, part of me is here now as well. And my son, of course, is Australian, so and he
Yeah.
identifies Australian. So that in itself is reason for me I need to be here with my son. So
Mm.
um my son doesn't know Ireland. I mean, we've gone loads of times. When he was little, we went every year, but still, this is his home. You
Yeah.
know, the gum tree for him is what trees look like. He
Yes, of course.
doesn't look at the gum trees like they're aliens. Oh, that's only me. But that's what trees look like. He always says, "Why do you keep talking about the gum trees, Mum?"
I love that. You wouldn't understand. Yeah. Wow. And
Oh,
so do you
yeah.
have a sense of your home being within? Like, do you feel as though you just have 2 homes?
Um, you know, the more I stay here, the more this becomes my home for sure.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, you can greet it with folded arms and say, no, this is, you know, you can, but eventually you have to kind of lay down the weapons and either embrace it or get on with it. Otherwise, it can really cut you up. So
Mm.
embracing for me was probably what I needed to do, and I slowly had to let go
Yeah.
of what I perceived my home was, and really, you know, just merge in and,
Mm.
as they say, lean into it, as they might say. And
Yes.
it helped a lot once I started making myself lean into it. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, this is my home now. I would
Mm.
still call myself Irish Australian, I suppose, but I sometimes get called Australian. That doesn't feel alien either.
Mm.
You know, whereas maybe 14 years ago that would have felt quite alien.
Okay.
Mm.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah,
Sounds
so
like you've landed in a good place, as
yeah,
in sort of you're feeling like
yeah.
you've
Well,
found your feet.
you know, let's
Mm.
just say you move to Ireland, for example, tomorrow. You might
Mm.
love it, but you might say, well, you know, it tastes a bit different, you know,
Mm.
until until the taste becomes familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then I suppose it becomes your home, doesn't it?
it does.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, well, thank you so much for speaking with me, Julie.
All right.